Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to you another video, and today we're going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Shield Hero, Highschool DxD, Devil of the Shield, Season 1, Part 2. As always, before we get into today's video, I do want to say thank you to everyone who supports Power Core Productions and Podcastings. As always, I cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow. You make the core grow, as we are on the road to 2K and beyond. I also do want to say thank you to everyone for the initial reaction to the first part of this series. The reception has been absolutely amazing. You guys really do love the Highschool DxD content, so thanks for letting me know through your actions, through everything that I've been seeing. Really lets me know that the channel is going in a good direction. But not just with this story, with all of them. The positive feedback has been amazing, and the growth of the channel has been absolutely mind-blowing. Really does feel like we are getting closer and closer every day to getting to where I want to be with this channel. So as always, I want to thank you guys, because I can't do it without you. You guys make this channel everything that is. So always remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings. But anyway, we're not going to sit here for any little farther. We're going to get into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. After Asya had introduced herself to Issei, she explained that she were new to town, but that she were actually lost. She was looking for the local church, and Issei knew where it was, so he decided to help her get there. As they walked, they would make small conversation, Issei learning a little more about her. She was very cute and attractive, so much so, but Issei wanted to be more of a gentleman and not given to his rather depraved nature. As they made their way to the church, though, they would come across a boy who had injured himself, and Asya would go to help, healing him with her power. Issei had never seen this before, and he wondered where she had gained such an ability, although he didn't ask her though, believing that he didn't want to intrude that much. Although while they walked side by side, Issei would get a strange tingling feeling. As he focused on Asya, he would notice the cross around her neck. As he looked closer at it, he would feel this strange sensation starting to grow in him more and more. Although thankfully it wouldn't last for too long, as they would eventually find the church that sat atop of the hill of the town. After pointing her in the right direction, Asya would thank Issei for his help, and she hoped that the two of them would meet each other again someday. Issei would agree likewise, and would leave her as he made his way to school. Once he had arrived, he decided to tell Rias about what he had experienced, and when he did, Rias would give him a stern warning, telling him that the reason he felt that way was because he was close to enemy territory. A place such as a church was not welcoming to devils. She would also advise him to be wary of Asya, as there were enemies out there known as exorcists, or devil hunters. These were beings capable of performing the devil purge, and if they did, this was something that not even the strongest of the devils could come back from. If you were to experience a devil purge, there would be nothing left to come back from. It would be the absolute end. Issei would nod in understanding, thanking her for the information as he left. Although Rias would still watch him from afar, she could tell that he were worried in some way, and she did want to look after him. Later on that night, Issei would be taken along with the rest of the group, as they had gotten word of a stray devil in the area. Issei would come to learn that among many of the responsibilities of the Gremory household, their main one was to protect their territories, this town being one of them. It fall under Rias's jurisdiction, and as such, she was responsible for the safety of the people, and allowing stray devils to roam free was something that she simply could not allow. As the group would go, Rias would tell Issei to stand back, as she would want him to watch the others in action, to get an understanding of their powers a bit more. Amongst the other enhanced abilities that all devils got, their powers were based off of something known as the Evil Peace system, a system used by the high-ranking devils of the underworld as a way to rebuild their forces, something that they had all needed to do following the events of the Great War. Not just the devils, but the angels and the fallen angels as well. Rias would explain that each one followed based off of a chess piece. For Rias, she was the king and de facto leader. Akeno was the queen, Kiba the knight, and Koneko the rook. Issei would watch how each one performed in battle. For Kiba, the abilities of the knight gave him immense speed, as well as using his ultimate weapon, his sword. For Koneko, the ability of the rook gave her the ultimate defense, as well as monstrous super strength, demonstrating this as she did battle with the monstrous Chimera Devil. And as for Akeno, she was the queen, the perfect combination of all other abilities. And she was really into S&M, which was shown in her fighting style, as she loved to see her enemies writhing in pain from her electrical charge. As the monstrous she-devil attempted to fight back, she would launch a stray attack at Rias. Issei would jump in at the last moment. The shield on his wrist would grow in size. As he got between her and the blast, Issei would hold steady for a while as the others would want to rush his defense. But Rias would stop them, as she wanted to see what Issei could do. Issei would hold firm, as the gemstone would start to glow. This monstrous energy was actually starting to be absorbed by the shield, and once it had, it started to morph and change in pattern. For Issei, this seemed to come natural to him. Whenever his shield turned into something new, the name of the shield would instantly come to his mind, as if it had always been there and it just needed to be unlocked. The shield transformed into an emerald green with the patterns of two twin coiling snakes. This was the Chimera Viper shield, the shield for attack and defense. As Issei absorbed the blast, he was able to store it before firing off a shot. While it didn't hit the target all the way, it did manage to hit her in some degree, giving her some pain. The others would congratulate Issei for unlocking another ability within himself, and she would be very pleased to see how Issei was progressing. But finally, she would step in and deliver the finishing blow. As she summoned her red magical circles around her, she would summon the Crimson Lightning, the power of annihilation, finishing the creature off once and for all. Once the battle was finished, Issei would ask what his piece was, wondering if he was a knight or a rook, or maybe even a bishop. But what he learned next would be a bit of disappointment for him. Rias would explain that he was actually the pawn. This was more than disappointing for Issei. The pawn, in his mind, was the most weak and useless piece on the board. The pawn didn't really do much except get fed to the higher enemies. What could a pawn do in the game? Although he wouldn't have much time to mull it over, for in the meantime, later that night, Issei would have to go and fulfill a contract, having been summoned. As he rode his bike to the summoner's house, he would think more and more about his status as a pawn. How could a pawn possibly level up? And if so, he would probably be a lot farther from getting his harem than he thought. Eventually, he would arrive to the home, but the lights were off. It seemed as though no one was there at all. He would knock on the door and it would open slowly, as Issei made his way inside, announcing himself. There was nothing except for a dim light off in the distance. Issei walking to the back of the room, it would be lit by a few candles. As he looked around, he would wonder where the client was, until he felt his foot stepping in something wet. As he looked down, what he saw next was absolutely horrifying. He saw the mangled and destroyed corpse of the summoner. It looked absolutely awful, so much so that he started to throw up. He couldn't believe that something like this could happen. Who could do something so barbaric? And as he thought of this, he would hear a sinister laugh from the back of the room. You wonder who could have done something like this? I am only enacting the will of God, wiping out those who would be foolish enough to summon devil scum like you. My name is Fried Selzen, at your service, and I am going to be the one that will purge you tonight. Fried would draw his sword and his gun to his side. As Issei backed away, he summoned his shield at the ready, the two of them standing from one another. Issei could see that the stray priest was using a sword of light, as he announced that his bullets had also been blessed by a holy exorcist. The stray priest would speak rather crudely to Issei. As the two engaged briefly in a fight, Issei's shield was strong enough to block his sword strikes, and some of his bullets. However, Issei's lack of experience in combat proved to be his downfall, for the moment that his guard was down, he found himself being shot in the leg, as he was slashed in the back, falling towards the floor. Fried standing above him mockingly, telling him that he was going to purge him once and for all, and rid this town of its devilish influence. Issei in defiance was preparing to get back on his feet, when Fried would yell in the back for whoever he was speaking to finish the barrier. However, this is where Issei would hear a familiar voice. As he would see the silhouette of a girl from behind the corner, he would see that it was none other than Asya. Asya walked over to Issei immediately, attempting to heal him, as she wanted to know what was going on and why was he here. Fried would crudely get straight to the point, explaining that Issei was nothing more but devil scum. This shocked Asya, and Issei had no choice but to admit the truth that he was a devil. However, all the same though, Asya still stood up for him. She didn't want Issei to die. He had been nice to her, and he had helped her. Not all devils could really be that bad. However, Fried wasn't having any of her insubordination. Instead, pinning her to the wall, he used his blade to slice through some of her clothing, grabbing onto her and abusing her. Issei, in his anger, would jump and punch Fried in the face with his shield, helping Asya and shielding her away from him. Fried, however, would quickly get in between the two. Fried believing that if it wasn't for the clientele that wanted to keep Asya alive, then he would kill her for her heresy However, Asuya continued to beg for the life of Issei. Issei could feel his anger beginning to boil within him. It was slowly rising to the surface, but it wasn't fully manifested. However, before the fight could continue, another spell circle would open. Kiba would come flying through instantly with his sword, coming face to face with Freed, as Koneko would arrive, along with Akano and Rias, the group coming to back up Issei immediately, as they would see that he had been injured. Rias would apologize for sending him into dangerous territory, into the hands of a stray priest and an exorcist no less. Rias would blast away at Freed, and Freed, now believing that he was in a bit of a jam, would call for reinforcements. The group would turn, preparing to leave at once. Issei would yell at them to go and grab Asuya. However, Rias would explain that Asuya wouldn't be able to make the jump with them, and that unfortunately she would have to be left behind. Issei would see Asuya as she told him to leave. He would pass out before he made the jump. Eventually, once he had awakened, Rias would heal Issei, and she could feel the faint traces of dark energy within him. She could feel that it was manifesting from where his shield was. She wasn't sure of what was happening, but she wanted to keep a close eye on him in the meantime. He would thank them for their help before he went to go home, reflecting on Asuya and everything that had happened up until now. He tried reading from the book of the Shield Hero, but he couldn't focus as he was still caught up in his own anger. Anger at himself, reflecting on his weakness and wanting to get stronger, although he wasn't sure where he should look to next. In the story, he learned of how the shield hero Naofumi gained his power through hard work and experience, as well as collecting fragments of monsters and other powerful beings. Maybe he could do the same, although he wasn't sure where to look at the moment. The next day, he would decide to walk through the park to clear his mind of things, where, by chance, he would run into Asuya. He was happy to see her and that she had made it out safely. He took her out to eat and to have some fun. In the meantime, he would learn more about Asuya and her past, learning of how she was abandoned by her parents at an orphanage that was run by a church. At a young age, she discovered her ability to heal others, and she was hailed as a hero. She healed many, from the old to the young to the sick, even animals. Everything was within her capabilities. However, one day, by chance, she helped a devil. When this was discovered, she was branded a heretic and forced to run away. Despite being taken in by the fallen angels, she really didn't side with them, but she had nowhere to go in the meantime. Issei would learn that her true desire was to make friends and to live a beautiful life. This solidified in Issei, now more than ever, that he wanted to protect her and to be her friend. Asuya would object at first, believing that it was more dangerous than anything for him to be involved with a girl like her. But Issei would assure her that it didn't matter to him what anyone else thought. All that mattered was what he thought, and what mattered to him in that moment was her. Asuya was extremely grateful for Issei and his kind words. However, their enjoyment would be short-lived, as Raynare would appear. She had come to take Asuya back, but Issei was not going to give her up willingly. Issei stood in front of Asuya. Summoning his shield, he would block a few of Raynare's light spears, as the two of them would engage each other in a fight. Issei using his shields to block as many of her attacks as he could. Issei would use the Chimera Viper shield, launching as many energy blasts as he could. He could feel himself starting to be wrapped up in his wrath and in his hatred. Raynare could see that Issei was definitely improving. If only she could have gotten her hands on that shield a lot sooner. But now she had her eyes on something even better. Their fight continued for a while. However, Issei would eventually be caught once again. He would be wounded by Raynare, and Asuya would immediately go to his side to heal him. As she did so, growing tired of their endless game of cat and mouse, Raynare would snap her fingers as multiple fallen angels would appear around them. Issei would stand at the ready, blocking as many of their attacks as he could, creating multiple airstrike shields to guard many of his blind spots, before attempting another blast at Raynare, only for her to disappear before reappearing right behind him, as she threw a rather large spear of light. Issei held up his shield to block, and he felt as though he had just barely avoided the attack, as Raynare appeared right beside Asuya, holding her, with a blade of light to her throat. She explained that if she had wanted to, she could have killed Issei right then and there. But however, she was going to let him live, only under the condition that he surrender and that Asuya come with her. Issei was prepared to keep fighting, even with his injuries. However, Asuya would stop him. As she looked back towards him, she would agree to go with Raynare, Issei still being held, as the remaining fallen angels would have him surrounded. He would beg her to stay, but Asuya would assure him that everything was fine. She would thank him for a nice day, and that she was sorry that they couldn't have stayed a bit longer. With that, Raynare, along with her counterparts, would all disappear at once, leaving Issei completely alone. But now, the only thing that he could think to do was figure out a way to get Asuya back. Back at the Occult Research Club, Rias would slap Issei for disobeying her orders. But Issei didn't really care in this moment. Rias tried to speak with him and reason with him, but Issei didn't really understand much of anything. He didn't really care in this moment either. If she really felt that way, then he was probably should just leave. Maybe it was for the best. She would silence him for saying such foolish things, but Issei felt it was the truth. After all, he was nothing more than a pawn, the weakest piece on the board. There wasn't anything that he could do. However, much to his own amazement, that was quite the contrary. As Reeves would explain, the pawn itself could be upgraded in enemy territory, as the king claimed it. And as such, the pawn had the capabilities to gain the powers of any other piece aside from the king on the board. For example, the fallen angel's church would be considered enemy territory, and the deeper he progressed inside, the stronger he could become. However, his sacred gear was a reflection of his own emotion, and that the stronger those emotions were, the more that he could tap into its abilities. Even for the shield, as one of the 4 cardinal weapons, it was, amongst all of them, the weapon that contained the greatest potential. Of the 13 original Longinus, even amongst the 2 great dragons themselves, the shield wasn't behind in terms of strength and power. Unknown to Issei, deep within the shield lied a powerful beast, his own dragon, the Dark Dragon. Even for the other weapons, they had all been destroyed in the Great War. The spear, the sword, and the bow, but yet the shield had survived, and it lived on in him. She would tell him to be wary of his power, for he was on the cusp of achieving a new level. Issei didn't fully understand what she meant by that, but he wouldn't have time to ask her anything else, as she and Akeno had to leave to attend business at once, doing so rather quickly. Once they were left alone, Issei was still determined to go. Kiba could see this, and he and Koneko agreed to go with him as backup, because he was a member of their household, and they weren't just going to let him go somewhere and die on his own. Of course, though, Kiba would remark that he had his own vested interest for attending as well, as he wasn't very fond of fallen angels. In fact, he hated them. As the three made their way to the church, Rias and Akeno had another destination. They would be on the outside of the church, where they would come face to face with Ratelt, a rather overconfident and foul-mouthed fallen angel. She would make it known that they had had their eyes on this town for a while, and that the ritual was not going to be interrupted by a few devil wannabes. However, Rias would assure her that she wasn't going to be interrupting anything, but rather her servants were going to be paying the fallen angels a visit, and that she and Akeno were not going to be getting involved at all. As Issei, Kiba, and Koneko would wait on the outside, wondering when they should make their next move, Koneko would head straight for the door, as she could already tell that they were going to sense them coming, and rather nonchalantly, she kicked down the front doors. With the other two backing her up, they would come face to face with Freed once again, the ex-exorcist remarking that he had never let a devil escape him once, and the fact that they had chosen to show up again was more of a mockery to him than anything else. Issei would instantly ask for the whereabouts of Asya, and Freed would tell them that Asya was in the basement under the altar. But of course, if they were going to get there, they would have to go through him first. Issei would charge with Kiba. He would promote himself to knight to increase his speed. He would serve as Kiba's shield, blocking and protecting his blind side from Freed as the 2-on-1 fight would begin. He would also create airstrike shields all around the large hall, Koneko bouncing off of them from the surface of the shield over and over again, closing the distance as the three devils would take on the exorcist. Freed had a hard time getting his bearings, as he wasn't able to track any of their locations. Ultimately, once a blind spot had been opened, with Koneko occupying his gun-wielding arm, and Kiba occupying his sword-carrying arm, leaving his body completely exposed, Issei would use the Chimera Viper shield, channeling and focusing his blast straight at his chest. As he did so, the blast would hit Freed, shooting and blasting him out of the building. On the outside, both Akeno and Rias would come into contact with a few other higher-up fallen angels, all of them mocking them, telling them that they weren't going to be able to escape. However, Akeno would respond in kind by setting up a barrier that wouldn't allow any of them to leave. While the others were on the inside, Akeno and Rias would battle the fallen angels on the outside. The one known as Ratelt, continuing to mock Issei, belittling him for his kind-hearted nature, something that they believed devils could never have. His foolishness for trusting Raynare, for trying to be a good guy. They would all continue to mock and laugh at him, and Akeno would simply shake her head, for she knew fully well what happened for those who mocked her king. As Rias's eyes would glow a bright red, a dark crimson circle would form around her, causing the others to fall silent. However, Akeno would simply smile, telling them that it was too late and they had incurred the wrath of the crimson-haired princess of annihilation, as Rias would unleash her full power, and there would be no signs of the fallen angels, only their feathers that fluttered in the wind. Inside of the church, Issei would make his way underground, along with Kiba and Koneko. However, as they had arrived, Kiba would already tell that it was too late for them. Raynare would turn back to them and smile happily. The ritual was already over, and Issei asked what it meant. Kiba would explain that to take someone's sacred gear was like taking away one's own life, as Raynare claimed twilight healing for her own. The group would fight through the army of fallen angels and stray priests, Kiba and Koneko creating an opening for Issei to get to Asuya as quickly as possible. As he did, Raynare, already happy, would let Asuya go willingly. As the girl fell into his arms, Issei would try to comfort her, telling her that everything would be alright, as he looked back angrily at Raynare. He couldn't understand why. Even if they were devils, this was just plain evil. He asked her how she could do something, how she could be so heartless. But Raynare would simply remark that this was the natural order of things, that humans with sacred gears could never live an ordinary life, but that Asuya had been spared. She had been spared a much worser fate. She had been spared an even crueler reality. But to add insult to injury, she was free of you. She was free of having false hopes, of believing that she could have friends. She thought that she could actually be something, and maybe she could have been, but there was no way she was ever going to be that with you. Raynare continued to mock Issei. Issei, his anger continuing to boil over. He would carry Asuya's body and move her from underground while the others created cover. Eventually making it above, he would hold her in one of the pews, laying her down as her life force was slowly being drained away from her. She would look up to Issei and see the tears that were falling down his face. She held up her hand weakly, trying her best to wipe them, telling him that it was okay, and she apologized for making him cry, wishing that she could have had more time with her friend. Her hand would fall from Issei's face as she had fallen asleep in death. Issei would be absolutely silent as he held her cold and lifeless body. His tears now were flowing as he cried out into the night sky. He looked up to the cross that hung above them. He asked how could someone like God allow this to happen? Asuya had put her entire faith in the church, in what she believed in. And yet look at the life that she lived. Someone like her didn't deserve this. To be used, to be tossed aside and treated like nothing. He yelled out for her to be given back. He yelled and begged for forgiveness. Was it his fault? Was it because he was a devil that she suffered the way that she did? Was this punishment? For Issei, he felt as though he were in a living hell. And Raynare joined him, continuing to add insult to injury. She continued to mock Issei for his foolishness, to try to beg for forgiveness in church, believing him to be a low-ranked devil, absolutely worthless and useless. He wasn't strong enough to protect Raynare. He wasn't strong enough to protect himself. She continued to make fun of Issei for his compassion, continuing to mock him for trying to cling to his humanity that he no longer had any right to hold. As she did so, Issei could feel himself beginning to snap. Deep within Issei's own subconscious, the dark voice would speak to him once again. Raynare's mocking voice, her laugh, it reminded him of a certain situation, of another shield hero who had been laughed at by the woman that scorned him. She laughs at us. She dares to mock us. Will you allow her to get away with it? No, I can't. What do you want to do? I want her dead. I want to see her destroyed. I want to rip her to pieces. Then do it. Give into your rage. Give into the hatred. Give into my hatred. Yes. Fill it with your crimson heart. As Issei, he began to feel the darkness taking over him. Raynare would turn to see what was happening. She could see that Issei's power was beginning to rise and make itself manifest. She would attempt to take him out as quickly as possible, launching 2 light spears that would stab him in the leg. He didn't even bother to raise his shield to dodge them or to block them. He took the pain completely. He fed on it. He thrived in the agony. Raynare couldn't believe what was happening now. No devil could withstand that type of power. How was he this tolerant to the pain? Rias and Akeno would arrive in the church. They would make their way from under the basement where they had helped fight the fallen angels, along with Kiba and Koneko. The 4 looking on to see what was happening. They could feel the dark energy filling the room. As Issei, his aura had completely changed. There was no compassion. There was no love. His heart had become completely black, and his soul had become as cold as ice. As a chill filled the room, Issei's shield morphed once again, a dark blaze coming aboard it, as the rage shield had been summoned. Raynare would attempt to throw more and more of her attacks at Issei, but Issei shrugged them off, his arms and legs becoming coated in a dark, black armor, as a black chest plate would form around his chest. His eyes, they had become completely black as he looked towards her. In one swift motion, he held up his shield as a dark blast of energy shot straight towards her, blasting a hole through the church and knocking her outside. As he walked towards her, Raynare would look to see that the boy that she had once known, the one who believed in doing the right thing, the one that had love and compassion within himself. That Issei was gone. In a last-ditch effort to trick him, she would transform back into Yuma, showing the bracelet that he had brought her, trying her best to play on his heartstrings, to bring up the good times, to see if he would spare her life. But Issei would do no such thing as he stood over her. Raynare would look up to see. She would see into the darkness that was his eyes. And the more she looked, it looked as though the darkness was staring right back at her. As Issei raised his shield into the air, there would be flashbacks playing through his mind. The betrayal of Naofumi. It played on loop over and over again. The death of Asya. You foolish fallen angel. You believe that you can take everything away from me. I won't let you. Foolish fallen one. I sentence you to cast your screams onto the forsaken heavens you worship. Within this version of cold ore, who shall swallow even your screams with her embrace. Suffer in anguish as your entire body is stabbed and skewered. I cast the Iron Maiden. From the darkness of the sky, there would shine a light. However, this light did not give comfort. There was no hope. There was only sorrow and pain for those who came across it. For descending from the skies was none other than the Iron Maiden itself, with its doors wide open. Raynare would try to fly away, but dark chains would ensnare her, wrapping and binding her whole as they dragged her inside. The others watched on, a sense of fear washing over all of them. Even Rias. She had seen destructive power before. She knew what it was capable of, and yet, even for Issei, she never thought that she would see him like this. She didn't think that he was capable of such savagery. As the chains pulled Raynare deep inside of the Iron Maiden, she yelled and begged. She pleaded for her life. She yelled that she would do anything at all. She asked him to name it, and she would do it. However, Issei would simply look towards her, and he asked one thing. Can you resurrect the dead? The moment he said those words, Raynare knew fully that her fate was sealed. As he raised his fist into the sky, the hand shrouded in the black armor of the dark dragon, he would bring his fist to a close as the doors of the Iron Maiden would close behind her. Raynare would scream for a final time as she was stabbed over again and again, until finally the last nail would be dropped down as the head of the Iron Maiden would slam shut, and Raynare's screams would be silenced, as falling from the sky would be nothing but black feathers soaked in the blood of the fallen angel, before finally it burned away into ash as the Iron Maiden faded into the wind. As the Iron Maiden faded into ash, scattering themselves, Issei's armor would slowly burn away from him. He was about to fall to the ground, but Rias would hold him up, telling him that she was amazed by his power, and that he never ceased to amaze her. However, all the same, Issei, He wasn't happy. The only thing on his mind was Issei and bringing her back, if there was any way for him to do so in the first place. As they all gathered around Issei, Rias would step forward, as she took from her possession one of her evil pieces. While she didn't think that she would be using it so soon, she believed that now was as good of a time as any. She took the bishop, and using its power, she was able to have the sacred gear restored back to Issei, allowing her to awaken once more, as Issei was reborn as a devil in the house of Gremory. As Issei would awaken, surprised to see that she were back alive again, Issei would pull her into a hug, shedding tears of joy that Issei had now returned, and Issei in kind was happy to be back with Issei and the new friends that she could make along the way as well. Rias, now happy to see that everything had worked out, was preparing for everyone to leave when Issei would black out instantly. Deep inside of Issei's mind, he wasn't sure of what was happening. He wasn't sure of what he was experiencing, but he could feel another presence within him. There was no mistaking it. There was something about this shield. There was something mysterious. A force that was brewing. Something that was just waiting to come onto the surface. Eventually he would awaken, but he had little recollection of what had happened up to a certain point. He couldn't really remember his fight with Raynare. In fact, the only thing he remembered was holding her and then her awakening. He couldn't remember anything that happened in between. He told this to Rias, as she wanted to know more about the Rage Shield, but he wasn't sure what to tell her at the moment. He also had another question, asking about how the pawn pieces worked. Knowing that there were 8 pawn pieces in a game of chess, then in all likelihood she would be getting more servants pretty soon. However, Rias would smile and tell him that she had actually given all 8 of her pieces to him, believing that the power that he held, the power of the shield, was so incredibly strong that he could handle it. The idea of the crimson-haired princess of ruin being guarded by the cursed devil of the shield. She couldn't think of a better pairing. Kissing him on his forehead, Issei would blush a little, and she would remark that it was just to help his stamina. Although actually, there was something else behind that kiss. It was done to seal away some of Issei's power. The power that had allowed him to tap into the cursed shield. She wasn't sure of its power at the moment, but she knew that whatever it was, she didn't want Issei tapping into it too much. Unknown to Issei as he slept, his body healed rather unorthodoxically. Due to the power of the Rage Shield itself, it seemed to be having an effect on Issei, one that even he couldn't fully understand at the moment. It was a great power, one that could rival even that of the 2 most powerful of the sacred gears, those of the 2 great dragons. If Issei's own was to awaken, then there would be 3 great forces in the world, and there was no telling what that may lead to. Although for now, she would only focus on helping Issei grow stronger, and the more he did, the more she would be impressed. As for Issei, she was welcomed in with open arms by the rest of those of the House of Gremory, all celebrating as they felt as though the good times were going to last for a while. With Asya now being admitted into the school, it seemed as though things couldn't get any better. However, unknown to the House of Gremory, from just outside their window, there lied, perched on the tree branch, a fiery phoenix, watching them very closely. And through the eyes of the phoenix, a man sat, watching the festivities from afar. A man dressed in a dark red suit, as he smiled, knowing fully well that soon he would make his presence known, and their time of peace and prosperity would be brought to an end. For he was coming to collect, and he would take what was rightfully his, and nothing would stop him. This concludes What If Issei Was the Shield Hero? High School DxD, Devil of the Shield, Season 1, Part 2. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we're going to be continuing What If Naruto Was the Avatar Naruto Rebirth Shippuden Part 2. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.